Okay, so today, as I just said, we're here to talk about the use of ESSER funding on construction and capital expenditures. I do want to say that we are still waiting for some guidance from U.S. Department of Education on some of these pieces, and I'll be sure to point those out, the parts that are where we are still seeking additional guidance. And to that point, it would also be really helpful if you could voice any questions or concerns that you have, so that in that process, we can also relay those back to the Department of Education to get the responses that we're looking for. So we're going to go through some definitions. So sort of what does the actual law say about what is or is not construction? A couple of updates to the guidance that's been issued to date, a walkthrough of the process of how you can request for construction on one of your ESSER grants, and then the majority of the time will be on questions and feedback, kind of like what I said before, so we can take those back to the Department of Education and get the clarity that we're looking for. So first, what is construction? So right here, this is really just a relay of what the actual statute says. So under construction specifically, you'll see this is not just the construction work itself, but also includes the preparation of drawings and specifications, and then the inspection and supervising of the construction. And then there's sort of two other categories that kind of are adjacent to construction. So one is capital expenditures. The capital expenditures piece is around equipment and assets, so anything over $5,000. So this is what would go in the equipment tab of your EGMS application. And then the second is around improvements to those assets or property. So a capital expenditure could count as construction, depending on what type of expenditure it is. It could also potentially not be construction. So for example, one of the schools that I used to teach in, we had a broadcasting studio in the school, and some of that equipment was definitely over $5,000, but it was not construction. It would just be like production equipment or a big, very large TV or something to that effect. And the second piece that is adjacent is minor remodeling. So this is where in the statute, they're giving a little bit of wiggle room for some type of construction-like activity to not actually qualify as construction. So this is alterations in a building that's already completed, includes extending utility lines, so water and electricity. So for example, if you need to rewire something in your building, that would not necessarily count as construction. Things that are minor repairs, things to that effect. It does not include permanent construction, structural alterations, and maintenance and repairs. So again, these definitions are not the most clear, which is one of the reasons we are seeking additional guidance, but this is currently what the statute says. So to kind of make this a little bit more tangible, here are some examples. So if you want to build additional classrooms, if you want to build out an outdoor space, that would definitely be construction. Things that would not be is if you're just looking to buy some parts or supplies. Anything that's a portable structures, which would include trailers and other modular units that some LEAs are looking to get in order to have additional classroom space. I would think of portable structure kind of as anything you can take with you when you leave the building. So for example, I would relate it to, like, if you think about if you're renting an apartment, you can install curtains and curtain rods or nail things into the wall, and all those things are things you could take with you when you leave. All of that would be considered a portable type structure. The area where we are looking for more clarity is, again, around that minor remodeling piece. The U.S. Department of Ed has said that some HVAC upgrades would be considered minor remodeling, meaning it is still allowable and it is not construction, which would alleviate LEAs of a lot of administrative burden. But again, that's an area that we're looking for more guidance and clarity on. Some updates to the guidelines. So these are things we previously have communicated, and there has been additional clarification since that time. So the first piece is that the LDA has to either own the building or have a lease of at least 50 years. This is still true. So if you do not own the building or you do not have a lease of at least 50 years, you cannot use ESSER funding to fund a construction project. The second thing that we communicated that there's been an update on is that the LEA needed to receive approval from us prior to putting a project out to bid. That is no longer true. So even for projects that you've already gone out to bid for, if you want to reimburse those or put those as a part of your ESSER application, that is fine and could still potentially be approved. I would just make a reminder, like with all of our federal grants, funding is obviously on a reimbursement basis. So if you've started spending money on something already, put it in your application, it ends up being unallowable, that means that you would need to find a different funding source for that. Last piece is around an environment assessment of the impact of the construction. So previously, we communicated that LEAs would need to perform this type of environmental assessment. That is no longer true. So unless there's local requirements that maybe require the construction project to have environmental assessment, just because it's funded by a federal grant doesn't mean that you necessarily have to go through that anymore. To walk through the process quickly, so this is an overall look at the process, and then on the next slide, I'll go a little bit more into the content of each step of the process. But generally speaking, you would submit a concept proposal. This is a PDF form that has a list of questions where you generally describe your project. You can get this from your OSSE grant manager, and you would email it back to them. Once that happens, you could get one of three possible responses. The first is, yes, this is construction and it is allowable and approved, in which case you would get an additional set of questions to answer, and then you would also need to sign a set of assurances specifically relating to regulations on construction projects. The second possibility is that we come back to you and we say, no, this is not construction and also it is allowable. This is the most ideal circumstance. As you can see, there are no additional steps required for this. So this means, yes, you can get this and it is not considered construction, so you don't need to do any of the extra steps or sign assurances or anything like that. It is an allowable expense. It'll just go through your regular EGMS application. Everything's good. The last possible response you get is that it's not construction and also it's not approved. So this is effectively if it's not an allowable expense and the project cannot be funded by ESSER. So if this happens, you should work with your grant manager to see if potentially the project could be altered in a way such that would make it allowable, or maybe there's a different program you can use to fund it. If neither of those work out, you'll have to find a different use for those funds. But that is the last possible response that you could get. All of these steps are considered part of your ESSER grant application, and so all of these would need to be completed prior to you getting an approved application in EGMS. The last piece I wanted to run through before I open the floor for questions is just talking a little bit about the content of what you would actually need to answer or respond to in each of the process steps. So in the initial approval, which is where you submit the concept proposal form, just note again, you have to own the building or hold a 50-plus-year lease to be approved for construction. And so that doesn't mean that it's not an allowable expense. So I'll go back really quickly. So just because that doesn't mean it won't be approved. If it turns out that what you're submitting for is not construction, it could still be approved. It's just a matter if it is construction, then you would need to kind of show that you can be in that building for a very, very, very long time. If you get to the step where you need to answer additional questions, the most substantive of those questions is that you have to assess the effect on any building or building eligible to be on the
Oh, good.
No, go ahead. Any building eligible to be on the National Register of Historic Places. And then the assurances, I just want to point out sort of the three most substantive pieces is that you have to assure that you're going to evaluate the flood hazards in connection with construction, follow the ASHRAE standards. That would be specifically in relation to if you're doing any kind of HVAC work, and then obviously meeting Davis-Bacon. The actual content of all three of these items are in the appendix. I'll just flip through there really quickly right now so you can see it. So this is what the concept proposal, those are the questions you'd have to answer. These are the additional questions you'd have to answer. And then this is the list of assurances you'd have to respond to. This deck and this recording will be posted on our website, so you can go reference that at your own convenience. So at this point, I feel like I've thrown probably a lot of information out there. So please, any questions you might have or any feedback that you might have, I'm opening the floor now. So please feel free to put that in the chat, or you can just come off mute and ask the question. I also can't see the chat right now. So if someone on my team, if you see something coming through the chat, if you could just read it out loud, that would be super helpful.
Hi, Linda. We did get one question.
Okay.
The question is, can you please provide a link to the PDF of the proposal?
We don't have a link, but we can send you the form. So if you just want to pop your email address in and which LEA you're with, we'll make sure to get back to you on that. Any other questions? All right, if not, I just want to point to a couple of resources around the application in general. So we do have a application tool. This is basically an Excel version of the application itself. And if you would like a copy that matches up to your LEA specifically, just email us and we'll be happy to send you that. The other two are the funding strategy guide and the budget codes. So this helps you understand how to categorize things within your application and also gives a sense of what are or are not allowable expenses. We have our website, the allocations, allowable uses, other communications are all posted on there. And then also the continuous education plan resource guide, which I believe all LEAs have submitted that at this point. But if you haven't, the resource guide is there for you. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us, ossie.esser@dc.gov, and we will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Linda, can I please ask Philip and Carol to tell us what LEA they are representing?
Yeah, if you could just sort of in general, whoever's on the call in the chat, let us know which LEA you're with. That would be really helpful context for us to also know, that your LEA is potentially thinking about construction. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you all so much for your time this morning. And again, if there's anything else, please, please, please do not hesitate to reach out to us.